All right, in this video we're going to be looking at 10.1, which is volume of cylinders. We're going to be doing two sections of chapter 10 to kind of finish up the year. So before I get started, I do want to remind you that you guys need to be submitting your work on Google Classroom. Very few of you are actually turning in work, kind of all the steps leading to your answer, and so that's why many of you are getting zeros on your homework. So make sure you're not just doing big ideas, but you're also submitting all your steps and your work for each problem on Google Classroom. Okay, all right, so to jump into this lesson, we're going to be looking at volume of a cylinder. So remember from last year that volume is how much an object can hold. So we're looking at just what the object can hold. For these shapes, we're going to be looking at a formula that is the area of the base times the height. And because these are cylinders and the base is a circle, the area of the base is pi r squared, and then we'll be multiplying by the height. So this will be the formula we're using. R stands for radius, which when you have a circle, the radius is from the center to the outside. And then for pi, I know a lot of you guys learned that it's 3.14. But that's certainly rounded. So pi goes on forever. For big ideas, when you are rounding to the nearest tenth, you are only going to get the correct answer if you do one of two things. You either need to make sure you use the pi button on your calculator, if you know how to do that, or you need to use a longer value of pi, 3.14159. And I'll explain that down below when we do some examples. But you can't just use 3.14, otherwise you'll get probably most of the problems wrong because it will make your answers round incorrectly. Okay, so to kind of jump in order to use this formula, we need to know the radius and the height. So we're going to look at 4 pictures and just how we can identify the radius and the height. So the radius in the first picture is from the center all the way across, so that's 9. And then your height is how tall the cylinder is, so that would be 6. For the second one, this cylinder is kind of on its side, so the height though is still 7. It would be how tall it is if it was standing upright, and then the radius that halfway across would be 6. In the next picture, again, this cylinder is on its side, but the height is still 16. Now, if you focus in on this picture, the line going all the way across indicates that that 8 is all the way across because that pink line goes from top to bottom. So that means the whole thing is 8, which means the radius would be half of that, or 4. Okay, and then the next one is called an oblique cylinder because it's kind of pushed to the side, but we're going to treat this one really just the same. Here your height is 10, and then the radius is halfway across, so that is 5. All right, last 2 examples. We're going to find the volume of these cylinders and we're going to round to the nearest tenth. Okay, so when we are doing this, we're using the formula that volume is pi r squared times the height. So for pi, we're going to use, if you have on your calculator the pi button and you know how to use that, feel free to use that pi button. Otherwise, we're going to use pi as 3.14159. The radius is 3, and then the height is 6. Okay, so you can show your work by filling in this line to show the numbers that you're using, and then you can go ahead and go to your calculator and type in 3.14159 times 3 times 3 times 6. And again, I'm doing 3 times 3 because you have that 3 squared. Okay, and that gives us 169.64586. So rounding to the nearest tenth, we're looking at the first number after our decimal. 4 would keep 6 as 6. So our final answer would be 169.6 meters cubed. Okay. All right, so the next one we have, again, we're going to use the formula pi r squared h. So for pi, we're going to use 3.14159. The radius, so if we look at this picture, that line's going all the way across. So the radius would be half of that, which is 2. So we'd have 2 squared, and then the height is 3.5. Okay, so again, show your work by putting all those numbers on that line, kind of substituting those into your formula, and then go ahead, go to your calculator and do 3.14159 times 2 squared, or 2 times 2, and then times 3.5. You can type that all in on your calculator at once. That gives us 43.98226. Okay, rounding to the nearest tenth. Well, our tenths place we have a 9. That 8 would round the 9 up, so this would turn into 44. Potentially, if you had this on Big Ideas, they would make you put that 0.0 just because it says to the nearest tenth, so you're still leaving that tenths place in. So 44 is certainly the same thing, but potentially they would want your answer to be 44.0, and then your units would be yards cubed. Okay, so your homework, you have a couple of these to work on. Again, please make sure you're showing your work and submitting that on Google Classroom, and message us if you have any questions.